is a Heisman frontrunner, which I never thought I would say.
Could you imagine? This is nuts. This is nuts. Like, we got a little teaser, right? Like, we got to cash some bets together.
LSU is coming in as a 2.5-point favorite here to West Virginia at Penn State. We got Penn State, Nittany Alliance, another team that is very hyped up here. They are 20.5-point favorites at home. All right, welcome into a Week 1 edition of What's the Spread? Miles on Sports here, Mr. Brad Thomas. It is time for the best weekend in all of sports. It is Labor Day weekend, which means college football from Thursday all the way to Monday night.
Dude, this is nuts. This is nuts. Like, we got a little teaser, right? Like, we got to cash some bets together. And then we got to experience what it's like to have an absolutely epic college football Saturday. And what I mean by that is we were hungover for like the next 4 days, but it was totally worth it. I'm actually going to be out of town this week. I would love to be at LSU versus Florida State, but I'm going to be out of town. But you better believe that I will be at the bar or in my hotel room with a ton of alcohol watching football this weekend.
And we have a great one, not on Saturday, but on Sunday night. Set your schedules. We've got the game of the weekend in Orlando, Florida. It's number 5 LSU and number 8 Florida State. It's our first big game of the year. LSU is coming in as a 2.5-point favorite here. Keep in mind and remember, because it had 8 million viewers last year, but we had this exact game in, I believe it was Baton Rouge in the Sugar Bowl. Last year on the same exact night, and ended up being a great game. Florida State somehow came away with the win, and now we've got a revenge game for LSU in Orlando. I'll go ahead and start here, Brad, because I honestly didn't have to think about this one too much. I am all over LSU minus 2.5, and I am really happy with it. There's a lot of hype behind Florida State this year. There's been a lot of hype around Florida State since the not too early top 25 that ESPN put out when they had Florida State as the number 4 team in the country ahead of teams like USC, Penn State, Ohio State, and the hype train has just left the station ever since then. Florida State finished the year really strong last year. They did. But I think LSU is a much more talented team, and the fact that they lost this game last year in their own backyard and now get a chance to go into Florida and beat the Seminoles as 2.5-point favorites. Brian Kelly, much better in big games than Mike Norvell. He's got much more experience. Florida State playing with a lot of transfers, which is a lot of talent. But LSU, their front seven is going to be much better this year. Jaden Daniels is a Heisman frontrunner, which I never thought I would say.
Could you imagine?
Yeah. There's 2 really good quarterbacks in this game, by the way, in Daniels and Jordan Travis. There's no doubt about that. But I think Jaden Daniels has the ability to really open this game up with his legs. And I like LSU in a very close game.
Miles, I'm going to have to tell you, I'm on the opposite side. And let me tell you why I think you're wrong. And it pains me to say this because I have LSU's season win total, but I actually graded this one as a coin flip, leaning closer to the loss. But the more I dug into this game, the more I wanted to bet Florida State. We know if we talk about the caliber of coaching, Brian Kelly's way, way better than Mike Norvell. I know that. I understand that. But I have to go a quarterback-to-quarterback matchup first. Jaden Daniels, solid quarterback, good with his legs. But when I was looking up their just sheer PFF numbers, I was shocked. Jaden Daniels, 90.1 PFF passing grade, where Jaden Daniels is a lot lower. Run grade, it's 81, obviously, with Jaden Daniels higher, but Jordan Travis was only like 87.5, which is still pretty high. Where it really does it for me is I think that LSU's defense this year will be in a lot of trouble. And against the teams that the games where they should win, they should be better. But against high velocity offenses, I think that's where we're going to start to see the biggest issues. And what scares me is Jordan Travis ended up being one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football. And what I did not realize while I was pulling these numbers, Florida State, number 11 in explosive play rate. Now we have to see how LSU handles that with their new group of defensive backs. Also, Mason Smith suspended for this game. When I look at numbers in the offseason, I try not to fall in love. But one thing that I fall in love with, I did it last year when I faded Hawaii in the opening game, is returning production. FSU checks in number 1 in returning production at 87%. Keon Coleman comes over from Michigan State, another explosive receiver to add to that already explosive receiver core with Johnny Wilson, and they have a good running game. I think this is one of those games where, yes, we know LSU travels like a madman, but this game is being played in Orlando, Florida. Orlando, Florida is the hub to all Florida State, all Gator fans. It's going to be fun. But I have to take the points here. Taking the points in what could be a 1-point game is something that I'm more than confident, more than comfortable taking. So for me, it's Florida State plus the 2.5.
Especially after a last year's game, really anything could happen, and it could easily be a 1 or 2-point game.
Whatever happens in this game, like, I won't be disappointed as long as we get another game as good as last season.
All right, let's go ahead and move into West Virginia at Penn State. We got Penn State Nittany Lions, another team that is very hyped up here. They are 20.5-point favorites at home. Brad, who do you like?
Listen, I'm not going to go as far to say that I am super high on this Penn State train like everyone else. People who have Penn State in the college football playoffs. Like, what's the difference between Penn State situation, an Alabama situation, Ohio State situation, a Georgia situation, where everyone's so much higher on Penn State than any of the three? I am higher on them than against this West Virginia team. West Virginia, listen to how gross these numbers are on defense. EPA margin 96th. Defensive success rate 124 against the pass. Net points per drive on defense 107. Points per Eichel 125th. Eichel rate 111th. And most importantly, early downs EPA 123rd. I'm not even going to go on the Penn State side because when I tell you the amount of talent they're bringing back, especially in the backfield, it speaks volumes for itself. Also, Franklin, when he is a 14-point favorite or more, covers like a madman. Why? Because what James Franklin does, and what some people don't like, but I respect the hell out of it, is when he knows his team is much better than the other, he just beats them into the ground, especially in Beaver Stadium. I think that this is a game that we could see get out of hand. I know that West Virginia is trying to build and trying to grow, but we have to be honest with ourselves. Me as a Mountaineer, a proud alumni of West Virginia, I know this football program is not going in the right direction. Neil Brown on the hot seat. They're not recruiting at a high level, and I don't expect them to improve defensively this year. Penn State has the bigger upper hand here. So, yes, I'm taking Penn State minus 20.5.
Yeah, I like that pick. Penn State minus 20.5 here. When I originally saw the number, I did want to lean West Virginia with the points. It's two big brands going at it here. And I looked at West Virginia's schedule again last year, and there was only one game that they lost by more than 3 scores. They really did a good job, as bad as they were. They did a good job keeping a lot of games close in that Big 12. Had a close loss to Oklahoma State at the end of the year. A lot of their games were 3-point games. I think they had a win against Baylor at one point. So it was hard for me to pick Penn State with so many points. But Penn State is a completely different team than any of those teams they played in the Big 12 last year. Coming into this year, I think this is James Franklin's best team that he has had. I think it's the most talented top to bottom. They open at home here. And yes, there are high expectations for Penn State, but I think they will handle them very well, come in very businesslike. They have possibly the best running back room in the country. I think Ohio State may have the best and deepest roster of receivers and running backs. But Penn State, though, great running game. You got Drew Aller, a quarterback who they have been waiting for Drew Aller. I mean, and not just for the 1 year that they had to wait for Clifford to leave, but for years they've been waiting for a quarterback like this that has had so much hype and so much talent coming in. I think that really could be the difference. How long, Brad, have you and I said for years that Penn State was just missing a playoff quarterback to get them to that next step? And Drew Aller might be that guy. Yeah. I mean, Penn State has really had everything, especially in the past couple of years. They've had these 10-win seasons, only losses against Michigan and Penn State or Ohio State. So what's going to get them over that edge is going to be the QB. I like the minus 20.5 here. I'm not going to be afraid of it. You got Neil Brown on the hot seat, and there's just so much momentum going in Penn State's direction.
Yep, I agree. Let's kick off to another game that I'm really excited about. Battle for the Carolinas. North Carolina taking on South Carolina. South Carolina right now a 2.5-point favorite. Total set at 64.5. Miles, kick us off because I want to know if we're on opposite sides for this one.
Yeah, this is always a great game. North Carolina, South Carolina, it doesn't matter when it's played. I remember for years, this was one of the first games that we got every single year. It was usually on a Thursday night. Now you got College Game Day going to Charlotte on Saturday for this North Carolina, South Carolina game. And for good reason. There's some good storylines going on here at both of these programs. You got Spencer Rattler, South Carolina, obviously Drake May, North Carolina. But I am on the Gamecocks here, plus 2.5 for a couple of reasons. Drake May had a lot of hype last year. We know that. But the North Carolina team really slowed down towards the end of the last year where South Carolina seemed to get better. And this is not going towards, yes, South Carolina had big upsets over Tennessee and they beat Clemson. That was big for them. But I'm not expecting them to carry that into week one here. But what I am expecting to carry over into week one is UNC's defense allowing the most points in the most yards in a very weak ACC last year. And on the offensive side of the ball, they lose offensive coordinator Phil Longo, who headed to Notre Dame. And I think they're going to feel that early on. I think that's really going to be more impactful than people think. Now, Drake May is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He's a Heisman front runner. Dude is going to ball. But new offensive coordinator, struggling defense. I'm going to go with South Carolina.
I'm going with South Carolina as well here. First of all, I had to ask myself, is North Carolina even good, right? Like Drake May is kind of like the Lamborghini parked inside a trailer park. Last season finished number 1 in EPA per pass, the top quarterback in the nation there. But if we look at where the matchups are favorable, it's actually going to be the difference between that North Carolina defense and South Carolina defense. Not calling either good, but South Carolina isn't all awful. They're great at field position, which is a weird thing to track, but that's just Shane Beamer's excellence at making sure their special teams play is great, making sure they don't give up explosive plays all of the time. 6th in field position on defense, 10th in net field position per possession as well. When you look at North Carolina, you try to find somewhere where they can improve defensively, right? Like they were in the bottom 100 in almost every defensive category. I think the only one was like where they weren't was defense. Was field position. It's funny to me to think that Rattler comes in and he can only go up. That's what I'm excited for in this game is we haven't seen the Spencer Rattler that everyone who hyped him up coming into college has been. And I think Beamer can unlock that. I have a couple notes about this game that I thought were kind of interesting here. North Carolina, even after losing Josh Downs, comes in number 3 in returning production. I do not care. Why is that? Because they're returning a lot of bad defensive production. I'm just going to think that South Carolina does enough to get a few stops and they just keep scoring. Like if you were to ask me if we were coming into the third quarter and the game just turns into a massive shootout, who's going to be able to score the most points on whose defense? It's going to be South Carolina, even though I rate Drake May so high. So yeah, give me the Gamecocks here. I'm glad that we end up being on the same side.
Yeah, Shane Beamer really is at a point with this program where are you going to go back to mediocrity or are you going to build off the season that you just had? And 2 absolutely huge wins over Tennessee and Clemson. Just huge for this program. But you got to build on it. And it really starts with a team like North Carolina because if you're South Carolina, you don't have a lot of room to breathe. They're in the SEC. We know that. I think they have Georgia week 3. So there's room to grow here for this program. They're going in the right direction.
Yep. Kick it off. What we got for the final game, Miles?
All right, final game. We've got a look at another one of the top teams in the country, East Carolina at Michigan. Michigan, a big number here, 36 points. It is going to be streaming on Peacock. And if you know me, I am always watching Michigan every second, every minute of every Saturday that they play. So you better believe I'm going to have to waste one of my screens, maybe my laptop, on Peacock for this game. Brad, it's a big number, but I'm going Michigan minus 36 here. I'm more comfortable taking Michigan first half because I don't know what they're going to do once we get into the second half. But listen, folks, Michigan is the absolute real deal. And this is a team on an absolute mission after what happened last year in the playoff to TCU. This team is going to be pissed. J.J. McCarthy is going to be pissed and embarrassed at what happened in that TCU game. You lose a game. And I know this is just the first game, but this is week one. This is your first impression to show everybody what you're about. And you got no Harbaugh. J.J. McCarthy, that game against TCU, you lose that game and played so horribly and turned the ball over so many times. And then TCU goes and loses like that to Georgia. Michigan's thinking we should have been there. But this is, I was saying it was probably James Franklin's best team at Penn State. This might be Jim Harbaugh's best team at Michigan. And that's scary to think, because they've been so good for the past 2 years. Michigan is my pick to win the Big Ten. I hate to say it, but I think Michigan beats Ohio State again for a third straight year. They're so deep on the offensive and defensive lines continuously. They know how to bully you up front. Corum coming back at running back, McCarthy at QB. But for this game, it's a big number, Brad. It is. 36 points is a lot, but I think Michigan wins this game by 40-plus.
Yeah, I think Michigan wins this game. I think Michigan scores over 55 points themselves, probably closer to the 52 mark. I actually took the total over 51.5. I took it at 50.5. I'm comfortable playing Michigan minus 36 and 51.5, probably no higher than 51.5. ECU, let's talk about those situations, right? Like I talked about earlier, Hawaii. ECU is just like Hawaii. ECU loses their quarterback after being a 5-year starter. Not only that, their wide receiver room and running back group is decimated with players leaving the program. This is an ECU team who scored a lot of points, but defensively they struggled. 127th in defensive success rate, and especially 131st against the pass. This is just going to be, if we go good on good, it's a total mismatch. Miles, you touched on this, and I want to say, when you have a program like Michigan who is there, they are at the level they need to be, and they lose the way they did against TCU. All they did in the offseason was anticipate when they can get back on the field and make up for those mistakes. This Michigan team is going to be fun to watch all year. Now, before it was the Blake Corum show, but Edwards proved that he can be not only a number 2 sidekick, but he can be the number 1 when necessary. They're going to run the ball and run the ball with great efficiency. Last year, 5th in offensive success rate for the rush and 5th in EPA per rush on defense. They are going to stifle this team. But I think this is going to be one of those games that we talk about where it's going to be so out of hand, where ECU gets the 10 points, maybe the 14 points that they need to get to hit the total. But I just think Michigan's going to score so many points. They're going to score at ease. It's going to be one of those situations, too, where I talked about this with USC, where if there's going to be a 1 or 2 empty drives early in the game for Michigan, just take their team total over because it's going to hit. But, yes, I am high on the Wolverines this year. I took their team total wins over 10. I love it. I like it. I think they make the college football playoffs at plus 125. I took that as well.
It pains me, but got to speak truth, man. Michigan's fucking good.
They're so good.
This Michigan program and team is the one I thought I was going to see all along under Jim Harbaugh when they made that hire back in whatever it was, 2015. This is what I thought I was going to see, and they're an absolute machine right now.
They're a machine. They're going to be fun. And you know what else is fun? Anybody who's watching, make sure you ring the bell on YouTube and smash the like button. But when you ring the bell, it notifies you when we have a new episode, so you will not miss any of our bets. Also, follow us on Twitter at @whatsthespread_. And if you're listening in podcast form, thank you. But don't forget to rate and subscribe. For Miles Markiewicz, I'm Brad Thomas. Best of luck.